I thought we'd start at the beginning and ask how your science career got started. What first got you interested in science? And how did that progress into a career in science?
Thanks, Andrea. And hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining. I'm feeling a bit nervous looking at the numbers, but really delighted to have an opportunity to speak to you and with Andrea today. So I grew up in Lutruwita, Tasmania. I work in Nipaluna, Hobart, and I acknowledge the Moanina people as the original custodians of the land and sea country where we work. And so I guess I just always had this really close connection to nature growing up here, and a really strong interest in the natural world. I thought I might even share a few photos actually, and we tested the technology. So let's see how we go. How does that look, Andrea?
Looks great.
So I included this photo, and I'll show you a couple more because they're photos that my dad took before I was born. He was one of the kind of early pioneers of underwater photography in Tasmania. And my brother and I grew up with big printouts of these photos on our bedroom wall. He's a marine scientist too, actually. And, you know, I think just being surrounded by these kinds of images and having the opportunity to be in nature so much just kind of meant that I was a little bit destined for a career in science and in biology and ecology. And so, yeah, I guess it was there from the start. I also included this image. It's I fished it out of my older daughter's school bag. She's 8 now, but I think she was about 6 when she wrote this, and it was kind of crumpled up at the bottom of the bag underneath a squash banana. It says, "The waves crash, the fish swim to the seaweed. I love the sea. It's like the sea is calling me." And I've used this quite a bit because it just, you know, captures so perfectly the way I feel about the ocean and about marine science. And actually, my elder daughter was born on the inaugural International Day for Women and Girls in Science. So it seemed kind of fitting also to acknowledge that hopefully there's this kind of cross-generational interest in science and in the marine environment. I'll stop sharing, but we might come back to some more pictures.
And so those pictures are extraordinary. I can't imagine getting to have those on my bedroom wall, let alone having a parent who had taken them. And it's wonderful to hear that that the love of the ocean is continuing on to the next generation. How did that progress into a career in science for you?
Yeah, so I was really lucky to study at the University of Tasmania, which had at the time and still has a really strong program in marine science that includes a large proportion of kind of working in the field, which was really attractive to me. And from there, I went to the University of Oxford, where, of all places, I got interested in the science of tropical coral reefs. So Oxford then bounced me to Indonesia first. And then I also worked in the Philippines and in Mexico on tropical coral reefs. And then I went to the opposite end of things, which was working in polar environments. So I spent about 10 years working in Antarctic marine science before I came to SARO. So it's been a bit of a journey all over the place, but an exciting one.
So can you tell us a bit more about that adventure in Antarctica? I think that a lot of us would like to hear more about that.
Yeah, I feel so lucky to have had that opportunity. I went on a 2.5-month research cruise. At that time it was on the Aurora Australis to East Antarctica, and we spent that whole time in the Antarctic sea ice. So it was in spring, which is when there's still quite a lot of ice, but it's just starting to break up. And we were basically studying the importance of that environment in relation to climate and also ecology. You know, of course, it was stunningly beautiful. I've got some photos of that too. So let's go back to my screen sharing. So here, this is me on the ice. My role was to sample ice cores, and then we melted them down and we looked at the algae that was growing in the ice and tried to understand, you know, where it was growing at the top or the bottom and what kind of features of the ice influenced the productivity that was then available to other things like krill to eat. It was full of adventures too. We got stuck in the ice, which happens. And I think, oh no, I've got a photo of the curious wildlife. This is quite a common occurrence, the curious penguins taking part in our science. So we were stuck in the ice. We were there for a week or so waiting for a crack to open up, and one day we were out on the ice, and this minke whale was popping through a lead and blowing and breathing and just kind of hanging about, which was absolutely amazing. And I was so captivated and taking photos that I didn't notice that I was right next to a patch of thin ice where we'd drilled a hole the day before, and I slipped right through into the freezing cold water. So that was an experience too. It does mean that my claim to fame is that I've swum with a minke whale in Antarctica. We also ran out of coffee because we were stuck, which was a bit of a disaster actually, for both the scientists and the crew, but you know, you do it tough. But yes, I feel very fortunate to have been able to have that experience.
That's not the hardship I expected to hear. I think for an Antarctic cruise was sure, stuck in the sea ice, fell in, but then we ran out of coffee. So to kind of broaden our questions a little bit to our theme of the day, one question that often comes up at our International Women's Day and men's health events is how to achieve that elusive work-life balance. Has that been a balancing act for you too? And do you have any tips for the rest of us?
Yeah, I think it's a tricky question, Andrea, because, you know, honestly, I don't think it should have to be a balancing act. And I think there are ways that, you know, we can change the way we work. And a lot of these are already happening actually, which is great. And so it means that the workplace is much more accommodating of these other roles that we play and more supportive of mental health. One of the things I found earlier on in my career as a mum in science was that there was definitely still a bit of a stigma around kind of isolating parental roles from work. I remember when I was filling out the paperwork for the first maternity leave I took, and the wording was something like, you know, I would be absenting myself from the workplace for my period of isolation. You know, this is 2016, and I'm sure it's been updated since then. But I do, you know, I do try really hard to be as visible as possible as a mum and as a scientist. I put in a couple of pictures actually because my poor kids get dragged around to all kinds of things. Here they are. So that on the right, that's my younger daughter, 4 months old, opening her first international conference, and then this was recently accepting an award where both girls were really, you know, they wanted to come and be part of it. And I think kind of that's the point that I wanted to make, that that I think families get a lot out of being included, and certainly I see that my girls they learn a lot and they ask a lot of questions, and I think it's really important for younger people too who are interested in science careers to see that it's possible, you know, to wear these multiple hats at once. I'll just mention another thing I think is an opportunity, is around being kind of more inclusive and allowing this better balance. During COVID, we learnt a lot about ways to work online, and that was great because it was much more inclusive of people who either couldn't travel because of family responsibilities or, you know, were choosing not to travel for other reasons. And I would like to see more of that kind of active decision making about when to travel and consideration of what the costs are to other things in your life of always having to travel for work. And then, you know, we learnt how to use the technology. We're using it now, and I think it would be a shame if we just kind of went back to the other way of working. Oh, and I should also say that I'm incredibly fortunate to have an incredible husband who is not only an amazing dad, but who, you know, shares the parenting load brilliantly. So, and he encourages me to switch off from work. So I think personally, at least, that's a really important element of this balance, as you put it. That was a long answer, Andrea. Sorry, I got
No, that's
I got
okay.
on a bit of a roll.
There's a lot of wisdom there, and I don't know if you got to see the react, but an awful lot of support for those ideas of being able to involve your family in your work, and not have to keep them completely separate, to recognise that you are a whole person, and being that involves relationships with other people.
Thanks, Jess, for your lovely talk through of all your different experiences. Pretty amazing to hear the diversity of work you've done. I really wanted to pick up on your comments about having an active and engaged partner in helping to raise children while you're trying to both have careers. I also had one of those, and one thing that was really interesting was the barriers that he had to being engaged actively as a parent and taking time out to look after children. Have you had discussions about how, you know, we make this a collective challenge? It is about both parents. It's not about the mother. It's about both parents being able to do that. Have you had any kind of interesting revelations or any discussions that, you know, any ideas of how we can, you know, do that better institutionally or in other ways across society?
Thanks, Harriet. And another great question. Interestingly, in my husband's case, at the time he was working in a very male-dominated profession, and we decided that I would take the first 6 months, and then he would take 4 months of dedicated time after me, after both children were born. And when he went to ask his employer for that period of parental leave, they'd just never been asked before. And so they kind of went, oh, I guess so. Like, we can't think of any reason why not. So maybe part of it is you know, asking more and giving a clear signal to employers that it's something that people want to be able to do. My understanding from Sarah was that as part of the EA, the entitlement for second carer, well, is that correct, Michelle? So that's a positive example.
I don't want to go into too much detail. Everyone's probably overhearing about bargaining, but do vote. It's that, so parental leave is 18 weeks paid leave for the primary care, and by the end of the next EA, if it gets voted yes, it'll be also 18 weeks paid leave for the secondary, the partner as well. So, you know, finally, you know, 2024, that we're going to see some equality there when it comes to paid parental leave. Hooray. Thank you, Tenzin. Ashley, do we have any more questions from the chat? Otherwise, then next I'll go to Humera.
Yes, we do. We have a question from your colleague in your workplace, Jess. Andres has asked, is there an age group or groups where we should focus more of our efforts to improve gender equality in science, I guess?
That's a really interesting question. I don't know that I could answer it. I think I'd maybe have to, I mean, you know, with the leaky pipeline, as it's talked about in science, there is a kind of particular mid-career stage where women tend to leave careers in science, and that is associated with kind of the age at which people might have a family, but there are other factors too. But I think Andreas is kind of asking more, are there, you know, potentially things we can do with younger women and girls to kind of set them up for successful science careers and improved equality. And I think that's also the case, you know, the more that we can engage with young people. And, you know, it breaks my heart when I talk to young people, particularly girls, who, you know, they say, oh, they just have this assumption that they will have to make a choice between having a family and being a successful scientist, and that still is, you know, something that young people believe to be true is actually really upsets me. So that maybe it comes back to that visibility piece as well, having young people be able to see that it is possible to, you know, to have multiple things in your life and enjoy them and be successful.